Well, by now you know exactly what we're going to talk about today. He's a man killer and he's a man eater. What he is one of the most dangerous animals in Africa, but he doesn't get the press that some of the other big nasties do. Of course, I'm talking about the Nile Crocodile, Africa's silent assassin. Now, before we get into the show, I'm going to ask you to do something I ask you to do every week. We're trying to grow our numbers. We're trying to grow our audience like you. Please hit like and subscribe. And remember, if you have friends that like this kind of action, make sure that they know about this show. All right, we're going to get into it right now. Welcome to Safari Classics TV. The other night I got home, I decided I'd just flop down in my chair and watch a little bit of TV, and I flipped it on, and I happened to get the start of the latest offering in the Jurassic Park. It wasn't a trilogy. I think this is their 7th or 8th offering, but here was a big tyrannosaur, and it was chasing a bunch of people and killing them left and right, and it was exciting. But, you know, everybody, including old Dave, watching that says, well, that's a computer-generated dinosaur. You know, dinosaurs have fascinated people for years. They like digging them up. They like watching fake ones on TV. But you know, not all dinosaurs today are computer generated. You want proof in the pudding? I want you to take a look at this picture. This has not been doctored. It's not an AI generated picture. It's taken exactly as it is. The gentleman on the left is our dear friend Bill Jones. Bill's about my height. He's about 5'10". So I want you to look at that crocodile, and I want you to understand that you're looking at a modern day dinosaur, a man killer, a man eater, and his tribe has been making a living in Africa since the first native got too close to the water. Dinosaurs are alive and well. You know, I have spent a lot of time filming and hunting crocodile in Africa. I can't tell you how many hours I've been staring at a croc out in the river that's always staring right back at me, and in the back of my mind I'm looking at that thing and thinking, you son of a bitch, I know that if you have a chance that you will kill me, and the only reason you will do so is to use me as nothing more than your next meal. And that is a pretty sobering thought, and I want to tell you a very sad and sobering story that will bring that reality into pretty sharp focus. In 2003, a husband and wife, family from Spokane, Washington, with their 2 daughters, who I believe were 14 and 16 years old, were in my Zambezi Valley. They were over in Monopools National Park enjoying a photo safari, and they had arranged for a canoe trip in the afternoon down the Zambezi River. The 2 professional guides on this trip were a man named Stretch Ferreira, who owns a safari and photo camp there in Monopools, and a professional hunter named Doug Carlisle that's a very good friend of ours, and we've known Doug for years. I heard this story between safaris. We'd been over there for an extended stay. My partner Tim and I had flown home, but we had to fly back about 2 weeks later to start another filming job. And the tragedy I'm about to tell you about right now happened between our trips. The family got in the canoe. The mom and the dad were with Stretch, and they were in the back canoe, and in the front canoe, Doug Carlisle had the 2 teenage daughters. Now, one of the daughters was sitting in the front of the canoe on the bench, and the middle seat was a igloo ice chest, and the other daughter was sitting on that. And there's a lot of islands in the Zambezi, and they were pretty close to the bank, but they were going between the bank and an island, and they came around a little bit of cut, and there were 2 really, really big crocodiles that were on the bank. Now, both of the crocodiles, as they tend to do, they went right in the water, and Doug or Stretch both saw them. Neither one of them really thought anything about it. About 5 seconds later, one of the crocs, and they were both very large crocs, 14-footers, slammed into the canoe, came Doug said it was like a torpedo, and he slammed into it. And of course, you're talking about a 1,500-pound animal, and it threw the canoe into chaos. The daughter in the middle lost her balance, kind of stood up, and as she was trying to right herself, she put her arm down outside the canoe to kind of catch herself. And in that instant, in a terrible instant, that croc saw the arm, reached up and grabbed her, and with one flip of his massive head, this child was in the water. And I can't even begin. It still bothers me to this day to think of the parents 20 yards watching this literal living nightmare unfold and watching their daughter yanked out. Well, the crocodile immediately took her underwater. Doug did the only thing he could do. He grabbed a paddle, and about that time the crocodile surfaced again, and he started slamming it as hard as he could. He said it was literally like being caught in one of those nightmares you can't wake up from. But he gave it 3 or 4 big blows on the top of the head, and the croc spun again and went down again. 4 or 5 seconds later, he said it surfaced for the second time, was about 10 yards really between the canoes, and the parents could see this nightmare unfolding. And then the crocodile went down for the final time. And Doug was looking at me, and I just remember looking into his eyes. He said, "I'll never, ever in my life forget watching the trail of bubbles going away from me, knowing that that was the final terrible, terrifying seconds in this young woman's life." And of course, they went to the bank. The parents, as you can imagine, grief, shock, stunned, all of those things, trying to process what's just happened. But after they got everybody back to camp, obviously there's no tracking this thing, there's no saving it, their daughter's dead. But the game scouts in that area were assembled, and they went out later that night with lights, and they were able to actually kill both of these crocodiles. And a post-mortem, they in the stomach, pieces of the gore were found in both of the crocodiles. And as Stretch came into the tent, and he was hearing the rest of the story as Doug and I were talking, and he said, "Yeah, come over here in the dining tent." And the picture that you're going to see right now is my hand up on the skull of one of those killer crocodiles. Crocodiles are a living dinosaur, and they are a threat to life and limb wherever they exist. Still, 2025, hundreds and hundreds of bush Africans are killed every year, including tourists that for some reason think it's okay to go swimming in the Zambezi or swimming in whatever. If you are around water in southern to central Africa, you are in danger. The number of people that actually find themselves in the jaws of a crocodile, the chances of them living to tell that tale are minute at best. A few years ago, I was hunting in Mozambique, and my professional hunter was a young man named Dominique Marteens. Dominic told me a story, and I said, "We have got to get this on camera, because it is a story of survival by the thinnest of margins."
During the 2001 hunting season, I was hunting in Tanzania under the professional hunter by the name of Peter Daphne, and we hunted the northwestern part of Tanzania, the Maiwasi Game Reserve, and we went out croc hunting the one day on the Malagarasi. We sneaked up into a big croc. Client put a shot into him, but it was a bad shot, and the croc made it down into the water. I ended up leaving the reserve to go and pick up a fisherman with a canoe to try and look for it. And while I was gone, the crocodile came out back again, and the professional hunter put a shot into him, and the croc was dead, but he got swept off the bank by the current. So we sent the fisherman through on the little canoe to poke around for it with a stick. Now, this was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and daylight was pretty much running out. We decided the only way we're going to save this croc and retrieve it is to get in there ourselves and look for it. And we waded through the river. Now this river is about 50 meters wide at that point, and we started looking around in the water for the crocodile. The fisherman gave me a knife to keep on me, and I was about in the water for about 10 minutes where I noticed bubbles coming up in front of me. And subconsciously I told myself it has to be a crocodile, so I pulled out to about waist depth. And we looked around again, and eventually I kind of forgot about it, and I waded back in deeper. And Peter was standing next to me with a fishing rod with heavy fishing hooks tied to the line to try and jig this crocodile. And he told me that he felt something on the line that was not a log, it gave a bit as he pulled. So I took the line and I went in, looking around with my feet. And all of a sudden I just felt this banging against my leg, and I looked over my shoulder and I told Peter, there's a crocodile. And as I said it, he took me by the leg. This crocodile took me and he lifted water, and he laid out flat in front of me, and he growled like a dog. Opened his eyes, and he slowly started to pull me back. Now everybody was going on frantic and mad. We put the clients were on the opposite bank with rifles and instructed to shoot if anything like that should have happened, and there wasn't a shot fired. So this crocodile dragged me back, and I knew from the previous time that I was in that it made a deep drop off. And all this crocodile was trying to do is get me into the deep water and drown me. At first I tried to pull his head off my legs with a knife, with my hands, but it didn't work. And then I realized I had the knife, and I started poking it with the knife. Eventually I calmed down enough to realize that I have to hit him behind the head. So I leaned forward and pretty much buried the knife in his neck. Obviously I hit a nerve because he let go of me and rolled into the deeper water. It's about a 3-hour drive back to the camp. We got to the camp. Lucky for me, I was hunting with 2 German surgeons. They put me on the table, used vodka as anesthetics, and operated on me, stitched me up. I was just very, very fortunate not to have lost the leg and not to have cut the femoral artery. And they reckon if it half an inch more, they'd have to amputate in camp. I got on a good antibiotic course, and within a month or so I was on the leg again.
On this same safari, I had a little bit of downtime in between hunters, and Dominique said, look, you said you like to hunt crocs. We've got a couple of croc tags if you're interested. Well, immediately that had my attention. Now, unfortunately, I didn't come with my rifle. I had to borrow a 30-06 with like a 6-power scope, the wrong medicine for croc hunting. But he said there's some giant crocs. They have a little tidal river. We are in the Mahimba safari area, and it's a tidal river, and it goes up and down into the mangroves. But he said this thing is loaded with crocs, and there's a few really big ones. So I was thinking the next day of nothing but the story that I'd heard previously, because I was now finding myself floating on a piece of styrofoam in the middle of a literally croc-infested river next to Dominique, trying to get within range of a big crocodile we'd spotted a couple of 100 yards down the river with the boat. Now we're getting closer and we're closer, and he's paddling his legs, I'm paddling mine, we're up in the mud, we're trying to get closer. I never thought we'd get as close as we did, but here's how this played out. The guy that owned the gun said, no, I'm 2 inches high at 100, and I'd shot it and confirmed that. Well, we ended up getting, instead of the usual 70, 80, 90-yard shot at a crocodile, we ended up with about a 30-yard shot at a crocodile that's behind a bunch of limbs, and I'm trying to estimate where I need to shoot, and that croc kind of turned a little bit, and I said it's now or never. He'd seen us, and I shot at this croc. Well, it was obvious that shot did not anchor the crocodile. He powered into the water at speed. Whether it was bush deflection, the unsteady rest on a piece of styrofoam, just a bad shot, whatever, the croc got away. But I knew that I'd hit the croc. The way his head snapped back, it was obviously that I got a glancing blow there somewhere. However, the good news was there was another tag available, so the hunt was back on. Now, the next day we went out again in the boat, and we had a guy from a local village, and he said, I've seen this giant crocodile several times, and here's where he usually pulls out and basks during the day. And we were going down the river real slow and glassing, and one of the guys said, there. Across the river was a giant crocodile, and he was in a mud bank. So we had to get out of the boat and go through this tidal mud, and it was literally like quicksand. And you would step out of the boat and you would literally go up to your waist, and you're trying to muscle your way one step to the next step through this knee-high, thigh-high, chest-high mud in a couple of areas. It was just a nightmare. But we got up into the mangroves, and we had to go inland and go about 100 yards and then look straight across the river where we actually had a shot. Now, Dominique was with me. We finally got into position. One of my partners, Tim, was the videographer. We could see this big croc. So I told Dominique, I said, brother, this is one of the trophies of my lifetime. I want this thing bad. I'm gonna go for the next shot, and I want you to follow and start pumping them into the shoulder. And when I start shooting, I want both of us to unload our rifles. And that's exactly what we did. Now, I've been in on a lot of crocs, and I've shot other crocs myself. And you hear the term ground shrinkage. The closer you get to the mule deer, the whitetail, whatever, the antlers tend to get a little bit smaller than you thought you were. Well, this was exactly the opposite of ground shrinkage. This crocodile in length was, I believe it was 14 foot 2 or 3 inches, but in the girth, it was just incomprehensible how big this animal was. And then we looked in its mouth, and in its mouth he had about 140, 50-pound bush pig. Now, crocodiles can't kill something like a lion and start shearing off pieces of meat. The only way they can feed is one catches something, another one comes in, they grab it, and they start rolling, and they eventually tear it into pieces. And he hadn't found another croc big enough to do that with this piece of meat, so he's just swimming around for a week with it. And this guy right now is hanging over my fireplace in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's absolutely one of my very best big game trophies of my career. There is something I find utterly fascinating about shooting crocodiles. You know, a guy might want to shoot, one elephant, or he said might shoot one leopard. Crocodiles are kind of like lawyers. There's lots of them. They're mean, and you never, ever feel bad when you hear one got shot. Sorry to my lawyer friends. Now, if you're going to go on a crocodile hunt, you probably want to take a big croc. And I've been asked 1,000,000 times if you could just go on one crocodile hunt to shoot a really, really good one, a 14-footer or up, what would be your selection? And that's pretty easy for me. Although you can find a big crocodile in a lot of African locations, the spot that I would go to, the place that I think consistently takes the biggest crocs, is Lake Cohorabassa in Mozambique. Now, I've got a buddy that likes to hunt crocodiles just as much as I do, Bill Jones, and he was hunting a couple of years ago with professional hunter Rob Oosthuizen, and they were after a couple of really big crocs, and this is a great place to find them. So right now, let's head to Cohorabassa and show you kind of the meat and potatoes of what you can expect on a croc hunt, and Bill, as he usually does, finds a good one.
After collecting the first buffalo, we had bait for the crocodiles. So we went down to the Panyami River. We took the bait in, got set up and positioned, as well as started building a blind. Rob said after we set the baits up that we would wait and come back the next morning and see what those baits would produce. As soon as we arrived the next morning, and pulled into Panyami River, crocodiles started sliding in from all areas. We were dropped off by our blind, got in the blind, the boat left, and Rob said, just let things settle down for a while and we'll see what develops.
It wasn't long before we noticed a really big croc he was chasing a lot of the females into the water, just showing his dominance in the area.
Here comes this huge crocodile, and he's patrolling up and down this canal. He was a lot of splashing. He was chasing the other crocs out of the area and setting his position as being the dominant male. And of course the baits were directly across the canal from us. So we were just sitting tight, waiting on him to position himself somewhere, hopefully on the bank. We waited and waited, and this croc finally stopped all his patrolling and did come up on the bank. And so he came straight up on the bank and stopped. We would have to totally reposition our rifle for this kind of shot. So we were balancing on the crossbar of the blind. Rifle was positioned through the blind, through the reeds, and then we put the shooting sticks up as well. So we had a rock solid rest, and from there Rod said to me, you know, we got 70, 75 yards here. Are you comfortable with the shot?
Okay, Paul, you see the one lying on the sandbank? He's facing just diagonally away from us. Just to the right? Yeah. Just look on the top of his skull. You choose the highest point, that'll be his ear. Just come down from that about 3 inches, 1 inch to the left. Okay, Paul, on your own time.
Reload. Good shot, Bill. He's that one that's been chasing all these others in the water. Yeah, he came out on the bank right here where he is. He gave us a broadside shot at about 65, 70 yards. Bill put in a great shot, and reload. Yeah, magnificent trophy. He's definitely 14 plus, and real nice big body. Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
A cornerstone promise we made not only to ourselves as the producers, but as to you, the viewer of Safari Classics TV, that we were going to show you Africa and the action and the adventure as it really happened. We were going to show you the behind the scenes, break down certain video clips, and tell you how and why it happened. And last week, we had a buffalo charge. It was one of the most serious charges we've ever had, and that nobody ended up going to the hospital or the morgue was, pretty outstanding. And it happened because there was some pretty good shooting going on. Now, I want to break this down. I described last week what I saw, really what I thought. But what I thought and what I saw were actually two different things, and I want to clear that up today because it's really an important point. Now, this buffalo charge happened when a bull was knocked down. There were a couple of great, secondary shots put into it with a .416 Remington by Joe, our shooter. And then the bull fell straight down on his belly. Everybody there thought they were dealing with a dead buffalo, including Miles McCallum, the professional hunter, Andy McDonald, our videographer, and Joe, the shooter.
Are you safe, eh?
A decision was made to move off to the right and approach the bull, which everybody expected to walk up on a dead buffalo. Instead, what they saw when they cleared the bush was a buffalo coming, Mach 2 at them. Now, at this point, our shooter, Joe, is using his dad's double rifle. And the minute he gets a clear shot, he takes the left barrel and shoots at the buffalo. Then the buffalo continues, and he's coming. And, there are people screaming to shoot him again. But he is pulling that double trigger. Now, Joe had said, I pulled the same trigger twice. And then I've got about 2 seconds to get out of the way and save my life, which he made a really great life-saving maneuver by jumping to the right. I thought what you're about to see right here, the big puff of dust on the back end of this buffalo, was Miles McCallum, the professional hunter shot coming in from the left side. What I did not know, that when Joe cleared the buffalo, basically in midair, mind you, he remembered that he had another trigger that he had to pull. And as he was moving fast to the right, he swung to his left with the rifle barrel and pulled off his second barrel. That actually was the puff of dust that you see. It hits the buffalo on the right hip, goes through the spinal column and exits in the big cloud of dust off of the right hip. Simultaneously, Miles from the left side shot the buffalo through both shoulders. So basically what you had happen, and it's the only thing that could have happened to save the day, was this buffalo had to be immediately incapacitated. There was no room. Nobody was in an angle for a brain shot. And Joe, as he jumped out of the way and swung around, put his other barrel in the back end and took out the spine, and it dumped the buffalo right straight into the ground. Now, our cameraman, Andy McDonald, he was next in line to get run over, and he was backing up, and he actually tripped over a log, and he turned the camera off for just a split second. So there was a lot of things going on, and like I said, I was trying to tell you exactly what I thought happened, but I was wrong on that, and it was worth clearing up, because Joe, my friend, you recovered instantly and made a hell of a shot, and without that shot, that buffalo would have probably been on Andy. So to everybody there, well done, team. Without any doubt at all, the most important piece of gear a crocodile hunter needs to consider is his scope choice. There is no animal in all of Africa that requires such exact, precise shot placement as the crocodile. You have to stop him in his tracks, and there's only two ways you can do that. You can shoot him in the brain, which is about the size of a walnut, or you can shoot him behind his smile. They call the crocodile smile. That's where the spinal column connects to the brain, and that will also anchor him. If you do not pull those shots off perfectly and precisely, you're going to hear a splash. He's gone. There is no tracking a wounded crocodile like a buffalo or a lion if you don't do it right the first time he's in the water. That is the reason you have to have a precise aiming point. Your professional hunter will be there with you, but what he's going to be telling you once you pick out your target, he's going to tell you, whispering in your ear, exactly where you want to put that bullet.
In the middle of the neck.
And that's where the scope comes in.
Okay, behind the shoulder.
And my scope for crocodile is the one I'm holding right now. This is my scope. This is a Trijicon AccuPoint in 4 to 16 power. It has the magnification even for that 70, 80, sometimes 100-yard shot, which is long. Most crocs are shot between 60 and 80 yards probably. But what it does have is that tritium aiming point, that glowing chip that you can center right exactly where you want that bullet to hit. And that's everything in crocodile. Remember, you get one chance. You don't do it perfectly, you don't do it at all. So you better bring the right scope. And brother, this one's mine. I've chosen this following bit of footage for our shot of the week for a couple of different reasons. Yeah, you're going to see a hell of a shot in just a second, but you'll see some really cool crocodile behavior. Tim Harold, a good buddy of ours, was baiting croc up in Tanzania, and this big old bull saw some other crocodiles getting on his food source. And, you know, over the years, we've killed a lot of crocs that were missing 1, 2, 3 foot of their tail. And, you know, we figured we knew how that happened. Well, now we don't have to wonder anymore. I know exactly how it happened. Check that out. Wow. And here comes the shot of the week. I'll tell you what, Tim. Now, Tim's a hell of a shot. I've hunted with Tim a lot, and he never hardly misses. But that was a difficult shot, and he executed it perfectly. That croc was still moving. You know, every time I do a croc hunt, you know, it's always a great experience. You know, you don't get a mistake with a crocodile. If you miss one, we call it the most expensive splash in Africa. That was a great hunt and a great shot, Tim.
This thing is amazing.
We definitely got our money's worth on this one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed this episode that we dedicated to the modern day dinosaur, the Nile crocodile. If you did, do me a favor. Hit like and subscribe. Until then, we'll see you next week on Safari Classics TV.